I'm interested to understand your perspective, because obviously you've been so in the industry, you know, in terms of asking those questions, been in it for years. And from your point of view, when you go to an exhibition, you know, prior to the exhibition, during, and then after, what would you say the most successful brands are doing from your perspective?
Good question. I mean, it is those brands that will allow you to look. I mean, I've been to so many exhibitions across the entire automotive industry. So it's not just sort of aftermarket exhibitions. It's, you know, car shows, technology events, and things like that. And I really enjoy sort of looking around. A lot of the time, I'm just there to sort of understand. I'm there to, you know, write articles, take notes. You know, car shows, for example, I like to sort of sit in the car, sort of have a proper look around it, really sort of get under the skin of the chassis, as it were. And it's always those brands that sort of just let you breathe, just let you walk around and just let you, you know, sort of understand things, but then are also interested. I mean, if I will say to people, you know, they'll come over, they'll say, oh, you know, are you interested in this? Well, you know, I'm a journalist, so I'm not going to be buying one, but actually I've got a few questions. And then if they, you know, a lot of them will stay engaged, you know, especially in the automotive show, because they understand the benefit of content and being out there. So they'll happily speak to you. I've had a few where I've sort of said, oh, you know, I'm a journalist. And I said, oh, okay, and then walked off. And that sort of left a sour taste in the mouth, because that's okay. I'm still important. I'm not buying it, but you know, I will be speaking about it. So, you know, it's everyone's important, as I said. You know, no matter what person is on stand, everyone's got their own reason for being there, and I think it's just acknowledging that, but also letting people just breathe. You know, that's important. And for me, you know, I get great content by spending time looking at things, understanding things, and then asking questions, and, you know, having a bit of back and forth and understanding it a bit more. And if I can engage with a brand from my side of things, then I go away thinking, right, okay, well, that's a brand that I want to approach for this feature or that feature, or I feel confident that I can go and speak to that car manufacturer about a bit more about this model and, you know, sort of really understand it. So, yeah, it's interesting, but so many different events that I've been to, and there's been a fair few horror stories, but mostly it's just about being left alone and being approached to have a chat and still feeling relevant when I'm being spoken to. And I think that's the same for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I think that you've also made a point there about almost segmentation, which we've mentioned a couple times now on the show, which is you're a journalist, but that doesn't quite mean that the connection, the conversation can't continue after a show. In fact, it would probably be in their interest to make sure that that does happen. And I think that when it comes to a CRM or noting the kind of different outreach that then has to come after the show, that is such a vital part, isn't it? Because as you touched on previously as well, we need to talk to the apprentices, to the technicians, to the garage owners, and then also to the journalists, and then make sure that after the show we are nurturing that relationship in different ways. So I'm interested to know, because obviously you're kind of going to the show for a slightly different reason than most suppliers. And how are you dealing with that in terms of segmenting? Do you need to? Will you be talking to different parts of the aftermarket? What's the plan?
So there's going to be so many different people there, as you said. And yeah, I'm going to be, you know, noting down sort of the people I will be speaking to, either on our stand or as I walk around. You know, I want to speak to as many different people as possible, and it's important to speak to as many different people as possible and just really sort of understand, you know, what they want to see. I mean, over the last sort of few months, I've spoken to a few apprentices in the industry for various different bits and pieces. And there's always been this sort of a perception, if you like, about apprentices, about, oh, they don't really care, they're always on their phones, they don't really work all that hard. But every single person that I've spoken to has been committed and absolutely committed to, you know, developing their skills and getting on in the automotive aftermarket or the automotive industry as a whole. So I will be making sure that I sort of, you know, I'll be motivate the sideshow they've got there, speaking to, you know, exhibitors there and speaking to, you know, attendees around that hall. And I'll be making note, like I said, I will have my notebook on me constantly, and I will be making notes about, what people do, job roles, whether they're apprentice, whether they're garage owner, whether they're technician, whether they're, aftermarket supplier, taking business cards where I can, and sort of making, I'll probably spend after the video I'll be doing a little spreadsheet and just sort of putting details into that, and just keeping everything recorded, because, you need to, as much as you can, you need to. And again, as we've said, we talked about, technicians might be future business owners, apprentices may be future business owners, and a lot of them will be there, they'll have questions, they'll want answers. There'll be a fair few colleges that are going, and I've seen it in the past where some exhibitors have been very much, it's just a group of college students, we're not really interested in them. They are important, are just as important as everybody else. They're there for a reason. They've come with their college, they're involved in, learning about the automotive aftermarket. They are the future of the automotive aftermarket, so they need to be spoken to. So, and, then they need to be followed up with as well. And just, whether if it's a group of students is their college lecturer there, find out a bit more about them, how you can work with them, how you can support them. Everybody's important in this industry, from the student right through to the business owner who's been there for, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's all about sort of making sure that you note down who you're speaking to, that you keep a record of, as many people as you've spoken to as possible, getting business cards, scanning. Obviously, we've got the scanning tags to try and sort of keep record of that, and just really making sure that after the show, you sort of look at your, the traffic that you've had through the stand, and sort of understanding that flow. Who's spoken to, what questions have been asked, and how you can support them going forwards, and treating everybody the same, because, whether you are a student, whether you're an apprentice, whether you're a seasoned garage owner, whether you're a journalist, we all have different roles to play in this industry. And whether it's, talking about the future or promoting yourselves, everything's important.
Yeah, and I think that from the point of view of maybe using this as a content collecting exercise, I can see it now, the title being more of how to use an exhibition as a journalist, almost using the time to get in front of people and to speak to people in order to create valuable content, to create discussion around your product, because the apprentices are going to be the best in terms of that, because they're going to ask the maybe obvious question that most people don't think about. They're going to ask maybe, silly questions, quote unquote, that might be a misunderstanding about the product that then you can clarify later on, or you can clarify in your sales pitch. So I think that, especially Motivate with that inside Automechanica this year, if you're not engaging with the apprentices, first off, they're going to be there like in droves. So you might as well come to terms with it now. But I also like a few things that you've touched on there, which is almost the attitude a bit sometimes around these topics. And I know that you do have more of an optimistic view, and sometimes the industry, we can talk about the skills gap, we can talk about the recruitment issue, we can talk about, we've touched on sexism and like you say, maybe the attitude towards apprentices. So how do you think that now, if I'm, making my content strategy as if I'm a journalist, using that positivity and optimism, why do you think that that's so important, and why is that something that you're strongly opinionated on?
Well, I think the aftermarket has been, there's various perceptions of the industry. Garages are dirty, they're going to rip you off, they're going to try and sell you a product that you don't need. That's been going on for years. And, I think as an industry, and I've been saying this now since COVID, the way the industry is moving with, new car sales all over the place at the moment, used car sales increasing, and the average age of the car park in the UK increasing as well. Drivers are holding on to their cars for longer. And when vehicles are out of warranty, usually, as we see, they go into the independent sector. So the aftermarket has an opportunity to lead the automotive industry. But it has to be very reactive to what's going on in the wider automotive industry, the introduction of electric vehicles and, more ADAS, and that's based around regulations from elsewhere. So there are challenges, absolutely there's challenges, but rather than focus on those challenges and rather than focus on those, those negative perceptions, we have an opportunity to sort of say, well, actually, these are opportunities. We have a skills gap. There's no denying that. There is absolutely a skills gap. We need to bring more apprentices and young people into the industry. And for the first time, the automotive market is competing against the technology sector in terms of bringing people through. It's not just mechanical engineering anymore. It's software-defined vehicles and things like that. So what can we do about that? Well, actually, again, that gives us an opportunity because we need to be working on electric vehicles more because there's sales are going up. So we can actually now find apprentices and train them up on modern technologies. They're more susceptible to it, they're more adaptable to it because they understand it a bit more than those who are, been working in the industry for 30 years, getting their hands dirty, stripping, from carburetors to injection systems and all the way through. So actually, the skills gap gives us an opportunity to bring more skilled workers in. So there's an opportunity there. The electric vehicle and adapting to electric vehicles, that gives us an opportunity to sort of highlight that, this is an industry that is modern, that is clean, that is fresh, and that is moving forward and adapting. ADAS, again, the same thing. It gives us an opportunity to promote the industry and the aftermarket and the independent workshops as, not dirty, greasy, oily, workshops with, dirty floors and oily rags left, right and centre, but as clean, modern facilities with the latest computing software that can really understand and work on a vehicle properly. And, things like labour rates and things like that, I think it's an opportunity to actually highlight the work that goes into, a vehicle. Customers may complain about a £70 or £80 diagnostic, but actually, engaging with customers and saying, you know what, this is why, it's not just about plugging a computer in. I've plugged that computer in. I now know what, where the issue is. I'm now going to spend, 15, 20, 30 minutes going through and finding that tiny little shorted out wire that's knocking against the bodywork and causing your car to not work, and really sort of highlighting that. Again, the aftermarket is really sort of a target, if you like, at times for mass media clickbait, things not to say about, things not to say to your mechanic to avoid being ripped off and things like that. But it's really not like that. And I think we have an opportunity to promote that. And I think if we focus on the challenges and the issues and the problems, what we're doing is we're going into negativity, and then we're just going to end up, perpetuating those stereotypes. There's not enough technicians to work on my vehicle. We charge too much for diagnostics. By focusing on the opportunities, we can make a good story. We can say that, we are progressing, we are moving forward, we understand as challenges, and we are working forward to get rid of those challenges and, really, future-proof this industry, bring young people through, bring apprentices in, work with apprentices. Don't just let them, sit there on their phones all day. Find out what they want to do, give them jobs that will challenge them, and make them sort of think and make them work. And really, I think by doing that, the aftermarket has an opportunity to pull itself out of those, stereotypes that have been there for years and years, decades, and really sort of lead the automotive sector in saying, we're ready for whatever the future throws at us. So this is why we're doing it. This is what we're building on. And this is why it's a great place to work and a great place to be, and really sort of, bring those younger car owners through and, understanding it as well. So it's a great industry. I've been in it for 12, 13 years now, and it's changed so much in that time. And I absolutely love it because it is changing, it is adapting, and it will continue to do so. And it gives me plenty to talk about as well.
Well, I love what you said there in building a story. And I think what attracts us all to the aftermarket or the automotive sector in general is there is a bit of a beautiful story kind of unfolding right now. Like you say, when I was starting 8 years ago, so obviously less than you, but even then it was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 ECUs in a car, and now there's so many, and it's all. And if, for example, you're going to pay your IT company £125, £250 an hour to solve a computer issue, that is now the same in a car. It's the same. You're diagnosing in a similar way, and I think that because of that misunderstanding of, like you said, like previously it was very hammer, spanner, manual, but now it is definitely competing with the tech industry. And I think that we are a collaborative industry, and because of that, there is that story that we could all tell together. And whenever there is a gap, like you say, there is an opportunity because we can close that gap.
Exactly. I mean, I'll bring back to there's one press release I remember I got last year, I think it was, which sort of said about bulbs. and it said that you can buy a bulb for £5, yet garages are charging you £25 for the same bulb. And it had a list of the different bulbs and the different, different cars, different bulbs, how much they cost, how much a garage would charge on average. And I got that press release, and I thought, a lot of outlets are going to run that as, garages are ripping you off kind of thing. But I sort of spun the story different and said they haven't taken into account the labour. My Ford Fiesta, I've got a bulb out at the moment, which I really need to get replaced. And it's not, I used to have a Mark IV Escort back in the day where I could pretty much sit in the engine bay and just take the bulb out and put it in. Now I'm going to have to take the entire headlamp unit out and put it back in. That's going to take me about, 20 minutes, half an hour. I'm sure a garage could do it quicker, but that's, on top of a £5 bulb, that's time, and that needs to be charged for. So, it's sort of making sure that we can explain that. And I think that's where the trade media has a lot to offer, especially, us in the online trade media, because we're more accessible to the public as well. You Google headlight bulb and you'll probably get, sort of one of us pop up there, and, the public can read our articles just as much as, technicians, garage owners and those suppliers. So we've got a real opportunity to sort of highlight to the public, ourselves as trade, that, the industry is actually, it's not trying to rip you off. It's not bad. It's actually very good. It's actually moving forward, and try and educate as well. And again, I think for technicians and for garage owners, they have an opportunity to sort of speak to customers, because I'm sure, there'll be some customers who are set in their ways who will say, no, I don't want to pay that. And, I don't believe that's a fair charge. But there'll be others who are willing to sort of listen. If you say to them, look, I need to charge you this because it's going to take me that long to do it. It's not just about putting a bulb in now. It's about dismantling the front end of your car and putting it, back together. Something you can't do yourself. So actually, it's quite a reasonable charge for that. And really talking to customers and just highlighting that. So we've all got a part to play in what we do. And I think, we need to focus on the positives, because there's so much negativity around the automotive industry and in the aftermarket. But if we can look at what we get, look at the stories, and really sort of highlight, and, I call out the big multinational, media companies, that will run those stories about ripping off, garages ripping off customers and things like that, or how, there's social media, there's a rise in social media about how easy it is to do a job. I think one was just, removing, getting rid of the diagnostic, the engine management light, just by disconnecting your battery and reconnecting it again. That's great until it turns up 5 minutes later, But just highlighting the fact that, actually, you know what? This is a great industry. It's working with, drivers. It's not ripping people off. And I think we all have a story to tell, and we all have a part to play in that. And yeah, as long as there's so much, online and social media content, we really can sort of highlight what we do. And in a way as well, bringing in apprentices who understand that side of things as well is a really good call, because, as I said, if you've got that guy who's on his phone, for, hours a day rather than repairing cars, fine, fair enough. He's probably on TikTok or Instagram or something like that. Speak to him, find out, actually, what are people looking at? What are you looking at? Is there anything we could do? Ask them about social media, engage with them in that side of things, use them to your advantage. Everyone's useful, and we all have a role to play in this. Everybody in this industry has a role to play.
And you are right, it is everybody. I mean, we spoke with Stuart Woolley from GarageWire, and he mentioned how when it comes to suppliers, when it comes to everybody in the industry, for example, I don't know that when I open up my car, there could be a Hella, a ZF, a Bosch part in there. I have no idea. And a lot of the times it's having the suppliers, manufacturers get to the end consumer, not just the mechanics and the people working in the garage, but the actual end consumer that is going to get their car fixed, to understand what is inside their car. Because like you say, you can have these comparisons of the bulbs and the labour rates, that first off, garages are probably too scared sometimes to up because of all this issue around that topic. But also, we have a responsibility from all ends of the spectrum to educate the end consumer on why it's important, why you need that, why this is better versus that. And I think that that's definitely a difficult one, because, from my opinion, I don't think content-wise we are hitting it right in terms of interest and generating interest. And I think we need that first, which is figuring out content, why people are interested, and how to make engaging content with hooks that stop me scrolling and make me want to actually watch it. And then it goes into then educating that end consumer. So yeah, I think that's vitally important, and definitely something you could get your apprentice to take a look at.
Exactly. They're really, they can be useful, and, educating. I mean, I talk a lot about the need to educate, and again, I speak to a lot of people, various people sort of at events and stuff like that, and car shows and stuff. And there seems to be a real trend now that whereas years ago the car was really important, it was a worthwhile tool that you looked after and, you serviced regularly and got bits and pieces replaced when they needed to. Now it's just I don't really care about it. It gets me from A to B and that's it. And I'll run it into the ground before I take it to be repaired. So we need to educate, and everybody needs to educate and say, that's not the point. I mean, the phrasing that I've sort of, really sort of come up for the last few years, preventative maintenance. If you hear that squealing of the brake, take it to your garage, because, the worst part is you're going to need new brakes, pads and discs. You might also, have an issue where there might be a deeper set problem now. You keep running it and running it and running it, you're going to end up damaging other components. Mm-hmm. So, it's a frustrating thing to say, we need to educate more drivers, because, we need to, it really used to be, I've got this knocking, this banging, I'll take it into the garage and get it, looked at and repaired. I mean, I appreciate, a lot of people now, look at the cost of living and, I don't want to take my car for repair because it's going to cost me, £300, £400, £500. But if we're talking to drivers and saying, if you get that, that wheel bearing replaced, it's going to cost you £150, £200, however much it does. The alternative is having your, entire hub assembly and, or wheel damage, or even worse, you drive down the road and the wheel falls off. That's going to cost you thousands, if not write your vehicle off completely. So which one would you rather, keep it up to date, keep it, keep, regular servicing, maintenance, and really keep that. And by that, at the same point, you can say we're not trying to rip you off in that respect, because we don't mind if your wheel falls off in your hub assembly fans, because you're spending £1,000 with us rather than £150. So realistically, we're doing ourselves out of a lot of money, but we're trying to keep you safe, keep you in mind, and keep you going. And that's really what the industry is about, is keeping drivers on the road.
Well, I think we've gone on a wide spectrum here in terms of not just audience, not just content, but, the missions that there are now inside the automotive sector. And that's a heavy one. So I think there's so much more to talk about here, but I'm also aware that I could talk to you forever. So considering what we spoke about today, what would your advice be to people exhibiting at shows like Automechanica?
Listen and let people breathe. Don't try and sell your product. Don't try and sell yourselves, but just use the expertise that you have in the industry to engage with the audience. Let them ask their questions that they will likely have, and just use it as an opportunity to chat, to find out more, and to gather information, because that is going to be so crucial in them making decisions to speak to you further after the event, and for you to really build those leads. It's not about selling, it's about learning and understanding.
Yeah, I love that. And my final question, where do you think, from an aftermarket lens, we are at in terms of marketing? Are we with the times? Are we behind? What do you think?
I think we're behind in a way, because we're still very much focused on the product selling and, what we can do and what we can help. But I think over the last couple of years, we've started to speed up to be, with the times. There's more video content, there's more social media content out there now. I think we just need to make sure that we're appealing to that broad range, like we said, the apprentices, the technicians, the garage owners, everybody. So we're starting to speed up now and get to where we need to be. Not quite there yet, but I think, we're close.
Thank you so much for your time today. I've really, really appreciated it. So can you let everybody know where they can find you online and at Automechanica?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can find us at autorepairfocus.com. We're also on YouTube. Just check out the YouTube channel, search for Auto Repair Focus, and also search for us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And then at Automechanica Birmingham, always happy to speak to anyone who's there. We're in Hall 20, stand A94. So pop over and say hello.